The rain hammered against my umbrella as I stood before my son's grave, clutching the folded flag they'd handed me an hour earlier. Daniel was gone. My only child, my baby boy, buried beneath freshly turned earth that smelled of loss and finality. I couldn't stop shaking. Then I heard heels clicking on the wet pavement behind me. Ava appeared at my side, wearing black Louboutins completely wrong for a funeral. Her makeup was perfect, not a tear in sight. She didn't even glance at the headstone. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, "You can leave now, Helen. Daniel's gone, and his estate is my responsibility." My throat closed. I managed to whisper back, "I'm his mother." Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You have no right to my husband's wealth." The words hit me harder than the rain. I stared at her, water streaming down my face, not realizing that this moment was just the beginning of something far worse than grief. A week crawled by in a fog of sleepless nights and untouched meals. Finally, I gathered enough strength to return to Daniel's home. I just wanted a few things, nothing valuable, just memories. His childhood photos, the acoustic guitar I'd saved 3 months to buy him when he turned 16, maybe his favorite sweater that still smelled like his cologne. But when I rang the doorbell, Ava answered with her arms crossed, blocking the entrance completely. "Everything inside this house belongs to me now," she said flatly, as if reading from a script. I tried explaining that I only wanted keepsakes, not furniture or money or anything of value. She actually laughed. "You want memories? Take your grief and go home, Helen. There's nothing here for you anymore." My hands trembled as I turned away, defeated and humiliated. But as I walked back toward my car, something caught my eye. The light in Daniel's upstairs office was on, glowing through the curtains. And I knew that room had been locked since the funeral. That same night, around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mike's name. Mike had been Daniel's best friend since college, the kind of loyal friend who shows up without being asked. "Helen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I can't keep it inside anymore." My pulse quickened. "What is it, Mike?" There was a long pause filled with static and hesitation. Then he said, "Daniel came to see me the week before he died. He wasn't himself. He was angry, hurt, confused. He told me he was filing for divorce." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of my kitchen counter to steady myself. Divorce? But they seemed fine. They were planning that trip to California. Mike sighed heavily. "That was all for show, Helen. He said Ava had drained their accounts. He said she didn't love him anymore, maybe never did." My blood turned ice cold. Divorce meant everything changed. If Daniel had filed before he died, then Ava might not be entitled to his estate at all. The next morning, I waited until Ava's car disappeared down the street, heading toward her office job downtown. Then I drove back to Daniel's house, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I still had a key from when I used to water their plants during vacations. The lock resisted at first. She must have changed most of them, but this side door still turned. Inside, the house felt cold and hollow, nothing like the warm home Daniel had created. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking beneath my weight. His office door was closed. I tried the handle and it opened easily, almost like it had been waiting for me. The room smelled like old books and his aftershave, and I nearly broke down right there. I searched his desk frantically, pulling open drawers filled with bills, old birthday cards, and business papers. Then I found it, tucked beneath a stack of bank statements. A torn envelope labeled divorce petition in Daniel's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it, but the signature page, the most important page, was missing. I kept searching, more desperate now, pulling out every drawer completely, checking underneath and behind. That's when I felt something taped to the underside of the bottom drawer. A small black USB drive, barely bigger than my thumb, secured with masking tape. I ripped it free and shoved it into my pocket just as I heard a car door slam outside. Ava was home early. I rushed downstairs and out the side door, my heart hammering, reaching my car just as she walked around from the garage. She didn't see me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my old laptop, hands shaking so badly I could barely plug in the USB. It took forever to load. Then files appeared on the screen. Scanned documents, bank statements, photos, emails. And one video file dated 3 weeks before Daniel's death. I clicked it. Daniel appeared on screen, sitting at his desk, looking directly into the camera. His eyes were tired and sad. "If anything happens to me," he said slowly, "don't trust Ava." Then he paused, and his next words made my entire body go cold. She said she'd rather see me dead than divorced. I barely slept that night. By morning, I'd watched the video 17 times, memorizing every word, every expression on my son's face. At 8 o'clock sharp, I drove to the police station downtown, clutching the USB like my life depended on it. The officer at the front desk looked bored until I explained why I was there. Then he led me to a small room where Detective Morris sat behind a scratched metal desk. "Mrs. Porter," he said wearily, "we've been through this. Your son's death was ruled an accident. Brake failure. It happens, unfortunately." I slammed the USB onto his desk. "Watch this first, then tell me it was an accident." He sighed but plugged it into his computer. I watched his expression change as he listened to Daniel's words. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair. "I'll submit this to the department. We'll review it." But I saw the doubt in his eyes, the reluctance. "You don't believe me," I said quietly. He didn't answer. I walked out knowing that if I wanted justice, I'd have to fight for it myself. 2 days later, someone knocked on my front door at 7 in the morning. I opened it to find a man in an expensive tailored suit, holding a leather briefcase and looking at me like I was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. "Helen Porter?" he asked, though he clearly already knew. "I'm Ava's attorney, Marcus Webb. My client has asked me to deliver this personally." He handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a cease and desist letter, full of legal language that basically said I needed to stop spreading false and defamatory accusations about Ava or face a lawsuit. My hands clenched around the paper. I looked up at him with all the calm I could gather and said quietly, "Tell your client that if she thinks I'm finished, she's very, very wrong." His smug expression faltered slightly. He turned and walked back to his expensive car without another word. What he didn't know, what Ava didn't know, was that I'd already made copies of everything on that USB. And I'd sent them to 3 different people, including Mike, my own attorney, and a journalist friend who owed me a favor. I tracked down Daniel's accountant, Mr. Blake, a gentle man in his 60s who'd handled my son's finances for years. He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop far from his office. When he arrived, he looked nervous, constantly glancing around like someone might be watching. "Mrs. Porter," he said in a hushed voice, "I shouldn't be talking to you about this, but Daniel was a good man, and what's happening isn't right." I leaned forward. "Please, just tell me the truth." He pulled out a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. 2 weeks before he died, Daniel moved most of his assets into a private trust. He didn't want Ava to have access anymore. My heart stopped. "Did he put it in her name?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Mr. Blake shook his head slowly. "No, Mrs. Porter. He put everything in your name." The coffee shop seemed to spin around me. If what he was saying was true, then Ava had been living off money and property that legally belonged to me. And she had no idea. Mr. Blake handed me a notarized document that I read 3 times before I could believe what I was seeing. Daniel had transferred the deed to his house, the house where Ava was currently living, into my name. The signature was definitely his, dated exactly 1 week before the accident. "She's been living in my house," I whispered, the reality sinking in slowly. "Yes," Mr. Blake confirmed gravely. "And according to these documents, she's been doing so illegally for the past 2 months." I felt something shift inside me, grief transforming into determination. I thanked Mr. Blake, drove straight home, and picked up my phone. First I called my attorney and had him verify everything. Then I called a locksmith. "I need you to change every lock on a property," I said. "And I need it done tomorrow morning." The locksmith agreed. Then I made one more call to the non-emergency police line, requesting an officer to accompany me to prevent any disputes. Everything was falling into place. Ava's world was about to collapse, and she had no idea it was coming. The next evening, I waited on the front porch of what was legally my house now, sitting in one of the wicker chairs Daniel had picked out himself. Beside me stood Officer Patterson, a kind woman who'd listened to my story with genuine concern. The locksmith had just finished his work, handing me a fresh set of keys. Then we saw headlights turning into the driveway. Ava's silver Mercedes pulled up, and she stepped out carrying shopping bags from expensive stores downtown. When she saw us, she froze. Then rage flooded her face. "What the hell is this?" she screamed, marching toward the porch. "You can't be here. This is my house." I stood slowly, pulling the deed from my purse and holding it out to her. "Actually, it's mine. Daniel transferred ownership a week before he died." She snatched the paper, her eyes scanning frantically. I watched her face go pale as she saw his signature and the notary seal. "You're trespassing, Ava," I said quietly. "I'm giving you 1 hour to collect your personal belongings. Everything else stays." She looked between me and Officer Patterson, realizing she had no choice. Then her expression twisted into pure hatred. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You have no idea what's coming." That night, I tried to sleep in my childhood home down the street, but rest wouldn't come. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a loud crash downstairs that made my heart leap into my throat. I grabbed my phone and rushed down to find my front window completely shattered, glass scattered across the living room floor. A brick lay in the middle of the mess, no note attached, just violence and intimidation. I knew immediately who'd sent the message. The police came and filed a report, but without proof, there was nothing they could do. The next morning, I called a security company and had cameras installed around every entrance to my property. I also installed motion sensor lights and a new alarm system. My hands shook as I wrote the check, not from fear exactly, but from the betrayal of it all. This woman had been part of my family. I'd welcomed her, loved her, trusted her with my son's happiness. Now she was trying to terrorize me into silence. But she picked the wrong mother to mess with. That evening, I reviewed the camera footage, expecting to see Ava. Instead, I saw a man I didn't recognize. The man on the security footage wore a dark baseball cap pulled low, but the cameras caught enough of his face for me to screenshot and print. Something about him seemed familiar, though I couldn't place it immediately. I took the photo to Mike, who studied it carefully under his kitchen light. His expression darkened instantly. "That's Chris," he said, his voice flat with disgust. "He works with Ava at the insurance firm downtown. Why would he be at your house?" My mind raced through possibilities. "I saw him at the funeral," I said slowly, remembering. "He stood in the back, left before the reception." Mike set the photo down and looked at me seriously. "Helen, there's something else you should know. Ava's been seeing Chris for months. Maybe longer." The room felt like it was closing in. "Daniel knew?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Mike nodded grimly. "He found out about 2 months before the accident. That's part of why he wanted the divorce. My son had died knowing his wife betrayed him. The pain of that realization was almost worse than losing him. Almost. But now I had another piece of the puzzle. I went home and opened the USB files again, this time searching specifically for anything related to Chris. I found a folder labeled evidence that I'd skimmed past before. Inside were dozens of photos, clearly taken from Daniel's phone. There they were together, Ava and Chris, at a restaurant, at a hotel, in a parking garage, always touching, always intimate. The timestamps made my stomach turn. Some were from 6 months ago, others from just days before Daniel's crash. Then I found one photo that made everything stop. It showed Chris's black truck parked directly behind Daniel's car in their driveway on the night of the accident. The timestamp read 9:47 p.m., less than an hour before Daniel left for his late-night drive. I zoomed in on the image. Chris was standing beside the driver's side of Daniel's vehicle, bent down low, doing something I couldn't quite see. My hands started shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the laptop. I grabbed my phone and called Detective Morris immediately. "I'm sending you something," I said. "And this time, you're going to listen." Detective Morris told me he'd look into it, but I couldn't just wait around hoping the system would work. I needed concrete proof about Daniel's car. I tracked down the mechanic who'd serviced Daniel's vehicle the week before the accident, a weathered man named Joe who ran a small shop on the east side of town. When I mentioned Daniel's name, his expression shifted to something resembling guilt. "I remember that car," he said quietly. "Nice guy, your son. Always polite, always tipped." I showed him the police report that listed brake failure as the cause. Joe read it slowly, then shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. Those brakes were brand new. I installed them myself just days before. They were perfect when that car left my shop." My pulse quickened. Could someone have tampered with them afterward? He scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Yeah, if they knew what they were doing. Cut the brake line clean. It'd take a few miles before they failed completely." I felt sick. "Can you prove it? Can you testify to that?" Joe looked at me seriously. "I can, but I'd need to examine what's left of the vehicle. And that'll cost money for my time and the inspection." Without hesitation, I pulled off my wedding ring and placed it in his rough palm. "Start today." A week passed in agonizing slowness. Every hour felt like days as I waited for Joe to call. Finally, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang. "Mrs. Porter." Joe's voice was grave. "You were right. I got access to examine the wreckage through a friend at the impound. The brake line was definitely cut, and it wasn't an accident. Clean slice, done with a sharp tool, exactly where it would cause failure, but not be immediately obvious." My knees went weak, and I sat down hard on my kitchen chair. "You're absolutely certain?" I asked, needing to hear it again. 100%. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This was planned, calculated, deliberate. His words echoed in my ears long after we hung up. My son hadn't died in a tragic accident. He'd been murdered. I immediately scanned Joe's written report and all his photos, then sent everything directly to Detective Morris with a subject line that read, "This is murder. You can't ignore it anymore." Then I sat at my kitchen table and cried for the first time since the funeral, not tears of grief, but of rage. Someone had killed my boy, and I was going to make sure they paid for every single second of his suffering. 3 days after I sent Joe's report, Detective Morris called me early in the morning. "Mrs. Porter, we're moving forward. We have enough evidence now to get a warrant." That afternoon, I watched from my parked car across the street as 2 police vehicles pulled up to Ava's workplace downtown. Through the glass windows of the insurance office, I could see people standing, pointing, looking shocked. Then officers emerged with Ava in handcuffs, her face twisted in fury and disbelief. She was screaming something I couldn't hear from this distance, probably claiming innocence, demanding lawyers, threatening lawsuits. But they had evidence now, real evidence that even the best attorney couldn't explain away. The USB files, the mechanic's testimony about the tampered brakes, the forged life insurance policy they'd found hidden in her home office drawer. Her web of lies was finally collapsing under its own weight. I drove home feeling something close to relief. But just as I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang. Detective Morris again. "Mrs. Porter," he said seriously, "there's something else we found. You might want to sit down for this." My brief moment of peace evaporated instantly. Detective Morris explained that while searching Ava's home office, investigators had discovered a life insurance policy on Daniel worth over $1 million. That alone wasn't suspicious. Many married couples had policies. But this one had been modified just 3 months before Daniel's death, changing the beneficiary from a joint claim to Ava as the sole recipient. "The problem," Detective Morris continued, "is that the digital signature authorizing this change doesn't match Daniel's usual signature pattern. Our forensics team believes it was forged." My mind reeled. She forged a signature to make herself the sole beneficiary? I asked, barely able to process it. "Yes. And here's the worst part, Mrs. Porter. The timestamp on this modification is dated the exact same day Daniel filed his initial divorce paperwork. She knew he was leaving her, and she changed the policy that same afternoon. The calculation of it took my breath away. This wasn't a crime of passion or a sudden, desperate act. Ava had methodically planned my son's death, covered her tracks, and positioned herself to profit from his murder. She planned to kill him before he could even serve her with divorce papers. I thanked Detective Morris and hung up, then sat in my dark living room, trembling with a rage I'd never felt before in my 70 years of life. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in October, exactly 4 months after Daniel's death. The courthouse buzzed with journalists, curious onlookers, and Daniel's former friends and colleagues who'd come to see justice served. I sat in the front row, clutching Daniel's favorite watch that I'd retrieved from his belongings, the one his grandfather had given him on his 18th birthday. Ava entered wearing a modest navy suit, her hair pulled back severely, trying to look innocent and sympathetic. Her expensive attorney sat beside her, whispering constantly in her ear, probably coaching her expressions. But when the prosecution played Daniel's video, the one where he said, "Don't trust Ava," and she said she'd rather see me dead than divorced, I watched several jurors physically recoil. Then came the mechanic's testimony about the deliberately cut brake line. Then the forensic accountant who traced the forged insurance documents. Then Mike, who testified about Daniel's state of mind in his final weeks. The evidence piled up like bricks, building a wall Ava couldn't climb. After 3 days of testimony, the jury took less than 4 hours to reach their verdict. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, forgery. Ava's face went completely white. But somehow, justice still didn't feel complete. A month after the trial, I received an unmarked envelope in my mailbox, no return address, just my name written in block letters. Inside was a photograph that made my blood freeze. It showed Chris, the man from the security footage, Ava's lover and probable accomplice. But in this photo, he was clearly dead, lying in what looked like a warehouse, his eyes open and vacant. Beneath the photo was a typed note on plain white paper. "He talked too much." My hands shook so violently, I dropped the envelope. I immediately called Detective Morris, who sent officers to collect the evidence. They questioned me for hours about who might have sent it, but I had no answers. Ava was in prison awaiting sentencing, so she couldn't have sent it herself. But the message was clear. Someone else had been involved in Daniel's murder, someone who is now eliminating loose ends. Chris had probably helped tamper with the car, and now he'd been silenced permanently. I realized Ava's reach extended further than any of us had imagined. There was someone else out there, someone who'd helped orchestrate my son's death and was still free. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every sound, wondering if I was next on their list. The nightmare wasn't over yet. I spent the next 2 weeks digging through every file on Daniel's USB, searching for any connection I might have missed. Then I found something in Ava's old emails, messages between her and someone named Victor Reeves. The tone was familiar, almost intimate, discussing money transfers and fixing problems. I searched Victor's name online and found he owned Reeves Auto Repair, a small shop across town. Then I checked Daniel's credit card statements and felt my stomach drop. 3 days before the accident, Daniel had taken his car to Reeves Auto Repair for a routine oil change. Not to Joe's shop where he usually went, but to Victor's. I called Joe immediately. Did Daniel ever mention why he went somewhere else that week? Joe thought for a moment. Actually, yeah. He said someone at his wife's office recommended the place, said they gave good discounts. Someone at Ava's office. The pieces were falling into place. Ava had sent Daniel to Victor's shop, where the brake line was likely cut. Victor was the missing link. I made a decision that probably wasn't smart but felt absolutely necessary. I was going to confront Victor myself, face to face, and get the truth out of him one way or another. I drove to Reeves Auto Repair on a Wednesday afternoon when I knew it would be quiet. The shop smelled like oil and metal, and old rock music played from a radio somewhere in the back. Victor appeared from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, a stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and suspicious eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm Helen Porter," I said firmly. Daniel Porter's mother. His entire body went rigid. He glanced toward the back exit, clearly considering running. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. I pulled a small voice recorder from my purse and placed it on the counter between us. "Tell me what you did to my son's car," or I'm walking straight to the police station with every email you sent to Ava. His face crumpled. The tough exterior vanished, replaced by guilt and fear. She said it was just insurance fraud, he whispered, his voice breaking. She said nobody would get hurt, that she just needed the payout. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know it would actually kill him. Tears welled in my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. You're going to tell the police everything, every detail, every conversation. Or I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison. Victor confessed everything to Detective Morris the next day, with his own attorney present. He explained how Ava had approached him months earlier with what she called a business opportunity. She'd paid him $15,000 to cut Daniel's brake line during the oil change, making it look like mechanical failure. She'd convinced him it was just a setup for an insurance scam, that Daniel was in on it, that nobody would actually get hurt. Of course, that was all lies. Within 48 hours, Victor was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder. The press went wild with the story, calling it the widow's web because of how intricately Ava had woven her plan, manipulating everyone around her. For once, I didn't mind the sensational headlines. They were finally telling the truth. Ava's sentencing hearing was postponed so prosecutors could add Victor's testimony to the case. Her potential sentence jumped from 25 years to life without parole. I attended every court appearance, sitting in the same front row seat, making sure she saw me every single time. She never looked directly at me, but I knew she felt my presence. There was one more secret buried in all of this, and I was about to uncover it. Mr. Blake, Daniel's accountant, called me on a Friday afternoon with unexpected news. Mrs. Porter, we've located another account your son opened about 6 months before his death. It was with a small private bank, separate from his usual accounts. I think you should come see this in person. I drove to his office immediately. He handed me a folder containing bank statements showing regular deposits, nothing huge but consistent, building slowly over time. And inside was a sealed envelope with my name written in Daniel's handwriting. My hands shook as I carefully opened it. The letter inside was dated 2 weeks before his death. Mom, it began. If you're reading this, then I've finally freed myself from Ava, one way or another. I know she'll try to take everything, so I've made sure you're protected. Don't let her take what's rightfully yours. Use this money to do something good, something that would make Dad proud. I love you more than words can say. Your son, Daniel. I pressed the letter against my chest and cried right there in Mr. Blake's office, not caring who saw. My son had protected me even from beyond the grave, thinking of my welfare in his darkest moments. That evening, I made a decision about what to do with Daniel's final gift to me. I used the money from Daniel's private account, combined with the life insurance payout that finally came through after Ava's conviction, to establish the Daniel Porter Memorial Scholarship Fund. It would provide full 4-year college scholarships to underprivileged students who'd overcome significant hardship in their lives, kids who reminded me of Daniel's generous spirit and determination. The first recipient was a young woman named Maya who'd grown up in foster care but maintained a perfect grade point average while working 2 jobs. At the scholarship ceremony, she hugged me tight and said, "Thank you for keeping your son's memory alive." He must have been an amazing person. I smiled through my tears. Yes, he was. And now he's helping others achieve their dreams. I visited Daniel's grave every Sunday, bringing fresh flowers and sitting on the bench nearby, telling him about the students his scholarship was helping, about the lives he was still changing. The foundation became my purpose, transforming my grief into something meaningful and lasting. Ava was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Victor received 30 years. Justice had been served, though it could never bring Daniel back. Then one Sunday afternoon, a stranger appeared at my door, holding something that made my heart stop, Daniel's watch. The man at my door was in his early 40s, wearing a paramedic uniform from Metro Hospital. He looked uncomfortable and sad. "Mrs. Porter? My name is James Crawford. I was one of the first responders the night your son's accident happened." I invited him inside, my heart pounding as I stared at the watch in his hands. "I've been trying to find you for months," he explained. That night, your son was still conscious for a few minutes after we arrived. He was hurt badly, but he knew he wasn't going to make it. He took off his watch and pressed it into my hand. He said, "Please give this to my mother. Tell her I love her, and I'm sorry I couldn't fix everything." Tears streamed down my face as James handed me the watch. It was heavier than I remembered. Then I noticed something I'd missed before. The back was slightly loose. I carefully opened it and found a tiny piece of paper folded impossibly small. With shaking hands, I unfolded it. In Daniel's handwriting were 4 words. "Mom, I love you. Whatever happens, live for me." I held that note against my heart, and finally, after months of fighting, investigating, and seeking justice, I felt something shift inside me. Revenge had never really been about winning or punishing. It had been about peace, about making sure Daniel's death meant something, about ensuring that the people who hurt him faced consequences. As James left and I closed the door behind him, I whispered to the empty room, "Rest now, my sweet boy. They'll never hurt us again." And for the first time since that rainy funeral, I truly believed it.